I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of a recap of what we've done this year through the different spheres and levels, but I want to try and tie that together into some sort of coherent model for spirituality. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot and talking to people about a lot. How do we get to a coherent sense of spirituality and what lies beyond? We've had the experience of the monotheistic religions creating a certain paradigm, and Christianity in the Western world has kind of flattened the religions that existed before. Islam has done the same in the Middle East, etc. So it's like, if we are going back to our roots, how could that look, especially given the devastation of the sort of monotheistic religions? And monotheism is kind of a false construct, but kind of not a false construct, and I'm going to explain that. But the trap with monotheism is that it kind of limits the vastness of creation into one way. And I think most simplistic monotheism, certainly the monotheism of orthodoxy, and this kind of literally happened in Islam and Judaism, which then went into Christianity, is Judaism had several names for different god forms, and then at some point certain people chose Yahweh, to follow Yahweh, and that's that. And Yahweh is the only God, but then that Yahweh energy became the energy of the all God. So even though the message of Yahweh, which is kind of a storm god, these first people that said he is the God above all gods, he's the true God, because they basically made a covenant with him, they took on his characteristics as being the definition of what the all God is. And this, the same went for Zoroastrianism, which was kind of the first monotheistic religion in Persia, and that kind of reduced the previous Persian pantheon to kind of a simplistic sense of a duality between a good god and a bad god, and kind of dividing the world and the perception of the world into these things, into these two entities. As opposed to a vast myriad, it became certain qualities which are good and certain qualities which are bad, and at all costs the good we must try and develop, and if we fail then we are kind of automatically bad because we don't fit into those two paradigms. It's obviously more complex than that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, let's say, Orthodox monotheism has taken the all God and kind of put it into the limited qualities of what these monotheistic religions say true godliness is. So we're going to start with the Empyrean that we worked with today, and that, in my understanding, is what the all God is. That is Pantheos, the God of all, the God that is kind of outside of the creation, the God consciousness that had the idea, who am I? What am I? That sparked the unfolding of the universe. One could say that the whole creation stems from that idea of who am I, what can I be, which then made all possibilities unfold. So that is kind of the thinker outside of the creation, the God that one could say is so vast that it doesn't kind of know our name. It's not a personal God. It's a God beyond the work within the creation. But it's all knowing as well. So of course it's present with us, but it's not directly present with us. And that, in terms of this model that we're following, I feel is the Primum Mobile, the light that has gone from an unmanifest light into a manifest light. So that Empyrean is the all potential that could be. The Primum Mobile is where that's stepped down and starts to become matter and form, and starts to enter and create the world of the four elements, the physical world, the other worlds as well. And that's still a great godly presence, but it's embodied, it's manifest. And then from there, in terms of our model, we go to the fixed stars, the Stellatum, which relates to that energy of destiny. It also relates to astrology. It relates to that divine story that astrology tells, which is kind of the story of the hero's journey. We can't box it into the hero's journey completely, but it's that sense that the stars are these filaments of light, these puppet strings of light that affect our lives and our destiny. And as we discussed last month, it's when our inner light is dim, those filaments of light, those puppet strings, control us and where we go and what we do and how we do things. As we become sources of light, as our own inner sun shines brightly, our inner light makes us independent of the then relatively dimmer filaments of destiny. Again, we're following the principle here of a higher light always dispels a lower light. When our light is a lower frequency than the filament of the stars, symbolically speaking, they control us. When our inner light becomes brighter than those filaments, our inner light kind of dissolves those puppet strings, and we become the source, and we become free of our destiny. And of course, that process of freeing ourselves of our karma is the process of becoming the magicians, that we are no longer at the mercy of those other forces out there. That's not to say we become completely free. Being in a physical or embodied universe means that there are certain conditions. In theory, we could, for example, break certain laws, like the laws of gravity or the laws of teleporting or whatever. That's possible, and it could be argued that certain masters can do that. That's because they've kind of renegotiated the laws of physicality. And that might be something that's worthwhile developing, or it might not be something that's worthwhile developing. It just depends on each person's natural desire and capacity. But from there, from that stellatum, we then step through or step down the different planets. And that's where the archetypes come in. So, all astrology is the positions of the planets, the positions of the gods and the goddesses within the map of the zodiac. So the zodiac gives the backdrop. It's the stars that kind of tell the story. But then the planets and where those planets are at your birth within astrology, in a destined sense, tell you more about which areas of the stellatum are activated by these planets, which are consciousness energies, gods and goddesses that are working as planets. And again, that's all a very symbolic, metaphorical language. But the upshot here is that going through those spheres, from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, etc., down, each one of those planets is an archetype, a god or a goddess that we have access to, that we can learn from. First of all, in a passive sense, we can learn from these gods and goddesses when they become present in our lives through events, through inner personality outbursts or surges or needs. Some will be less activated, some will be more activated. But the principle of the archetypes is that these are pure gods, goddesses, but they're also pure consciousness that hold and represent a certain energy, certain energies that allow the fullness of personality, human personality, to develop. So, in terms of these configurations of how the planets, how the gods and goddesses fit into that destined stellatum of the Zodiac, it's almost like chess pieces. They're placed in different ways, and therefore they tell a different story, and therefore they play out a different destiny. And that's kind of how our personality is formed. But as we become magicians, we can choose to develop certain archetypes. We can choose to build relationships, alliances with certain archetypes in order to develop either the positive side of an archetype where that may have expressed itself as a negative in our lives, or we can choose to develop completely underdeveloped archetypes that we may want. Our life might bring us success in money and career, let's say, but we want a relationship. So then we can choose to work on the archetypes that will help bring relationships into our lives. So going from the Empyrean Pantheos, which is the all God beyond personal experience, we go into the Primum mobile, which is the God, the great God, the bigger God that kind of knows your name. It's the God that we have a relationship. It's that love energy that holds everything together. It's Phanes in Greek mythology. That's the energy of love and generation that allows this universe, this creation, to be generated. But in order for this to happen, love needs to hold everything together. It's the glue that makes it all possible. It's that force of attraction, which is of course that energy that of the planets revolving around the sun, as one example, or it's what allows matter to hold together as opposed to splitting apart. It's what attracts people to one another. So that Phanes energy is kind of the Primum mobile energy. And then going down from there into those planets, those are the different archetypes that we can work with magically, that we can work with to heal our personality. And sometimes those archetypes reflect as, let's say, pure God or goddess energies, archetypes, representations, symbols. Sometimes they're the forces of nature that we work with. And these archetypes are kind of quite literal in terms of the planets. The Earth, Gaia, where we are, this Earth is related to, for example, the goddess Gaia or the god Hephaestus, which is about fashioning, about creating alchemy. We've got the earth in its raw state, and then we've got the possibility of transmuting, forming earth through magic, through alchemy. Then, the moon, and these are just some correspondences that I've thought about and worked with. You might have your own correspondences that you think about, but the principles remain the same. The moon is the goddess Artemis in the Greek system, and then Poseidon, the sea, because of course the moon affects the tides, affects the waters and the seas. That of course, again, the sea could be the raw natural force out there that the moon affects. So that might be the sea energy in one's life. But then Poseidon is a god that represents other principles like fatherhood, for example, or emotional maturity, etc. Then the next planet is Mercury, which is literally Hermes, or it could be the Demeter energy. I've given a male and female for each one of the Olympian gods, for each one of the planets having a male and female god, goddess correspondence. So Mercury, Hermes, Demeter, they are about moving between worlds. They're about transmutation. They are the holders of the mysteries. And then we've got Venus, the planet Venus, which is Aphrodite, and Eros, which is the male form of love. Aphrodite is the female form of love and beauty and harmony. We've got the sun, which is Apollo, and then Hestia, which relates to the fire and developing that inner fire so that we can transform with that inner light. We need the outer light for us to be able to soak up the inner light and build that inner fire. Because in all work in initiation into the mysteries, it's all about internalizing, alchemizing, sublimating, transforming inside so that we generate that energy to transmute outside. And then we've got Mars, which is the energy of Aries, and Athena. Both of those are war gods. Those are the energies of pushing through and making things happen and, going beyond where we have been. We've got Jupiter, planet Jupiter, which is Zeus and Hera. And those are the gods and goddesses of authority over our world, over ourselves, the inner authority to make change as well. And then the outer authority to trust ourselves, our power to create in the world. And of course, those are the archetypes we call on when we want to have a new way of interacting with the world. Then Saturn, the planet Saturn, represents Kronos, the god of time, and Rhea, his wife, and those are the parents of the Olympians. And again, that is the energy that takes us beyond personality, because let's not forget these Olympian gods that I've spoken about now are the different gods and goddesses that kind of determine personality. It's kind of the inner world that we work with, that we deal with, that has external expression, but that has internal expression. So Kronos is that point, time and space, going beyond, into the beyond, into the Stellatum and the Primum mobile, etc. Kronos is that last point where kind of our mortality ends. Our mortality ends through time, where we go into the beyond, into the heavens beyond. And then one could say that Hades and Dionysius, Hades is the god of the underworld, but he's also the god of transformation, transmutation, of the bridge into the beyond, of, sort of shooting ourselves out through receiving inspiration, but also through having the passion and ecstasy and transformative power to shoot out so that we can experience those mysteries. And Hades is the holder of the mysteries. Dionysius is the bridge to the mysteries. And then, as I said before, the Primum mobile is that God beyond all the gods, that holds the whole, or that is the soul, the genius that allows the unfolding of the universe. And then the Empyrean, or the Pantheos, is the God that's way beyond even that. So it's the beyond, then it's the bigger creation, and then it's the stepped down levels of creation, of levels of consciousness. And then within that, we've got the four elements. And of course, the four elements relate to the goddess Gaia, the earth, because the four elements represent the different building blocks of this reality. So, if we take what we've just discussed with the planets and so forth as the vertical axis, the elements are the horizontal axis. It's like, in Greek mythology, Gaia is described as the earth disk, the flat earth. Not that I'm saying I'm a flat earther or that the earth is flat, but symbolically speaking, it's this horizontal plane which has got the four directions: east, south, west, north. The four directions, each direction corresponds to an element. Each element has a power. Each element is not only a building block of, let's say, our physical bodies. Our physical bodies are made up of the earth, of the bones and the flesh, the water, of the water in the body, the breath, which is the air, the fire, which is the digestion, the aura. So we're made up of these building blocks. But our soul is that verticality, that going up through the heavens, up through the planets. And those planets, which relate to those gods and goddesses, represent the different facets of personality. And then beyond that, we go to the kind of purity of our soul. The Stellatum and the Primum mobile, the Primum mobile is almost like the soul in its purest form, in its broadest form, the soul that is experiencing all of our different lifetimes simultaneously. And then the Stellatum, the Zodiac, is almost like what the soul has chosen for us to experience in this particular lifetime, and therefore how those different gods and goddesses fit into our consciousness. And then the physical body is that horizontal axis of how we put together physically, how our world is put together physically. And given that we are embodied in this world, those four elements are the powers that we have to bring about transformation in the world. And of course that takes us to astrology as well, with the four elements in astrology, the tarot with the four elements, the four suits, wands, pentacles, cups, and swords. So those are those four elements that become our tools of magic, not only physically, but also inwardly and intentionally. And then another level of that kind of model, which sort of fits but doesn't fit 100%, in a way it does, is we've also then got the three levels of shamanism: the underworld, the middle realm, and the celestial world. And it does fit in the sense that the middle realm is this realm of the earth, of Mother Gaia. It's that disk realm. The celestial realm is, all that goes up, all that goes above. So that is the gods, goddesses, the Pantheos, the God beyond, that comes in and inspires us, that comes in and forms our inner world, our inner consciousness. And then the third world in that shamanic model, or the cosmic tree model, or the axis mundi model, the axis of the world, is the underworld, which one could say is kind of the inner dimension. It's kind of that which exists beyond physicality. So, it's not sort of celestial up here and middle here, and then underworld is necessarily down. It's down in the sense of down into another dimension, and that is the realm of all that has been, of our ancestors, of what we've inherited, of the deeper consciousness of history, of what has been, of the collective unconscious, of what we've inherited. But that's also the realm of death. It's also the realm of forgetting. So it's remembering on the one hand, it's forgetting on the other hand. So when we go through initiation, we can go down into that forgetting to be reborn, or we can go up into the beyond, into the grace of God, into the light to be reborn. And one isn't better than another. They actually tie into each other. Sometimes we've got to go down into the underworld to die and dissolve in order to be propelled up into the heavens, so that we can take that light and love of the heavens and reincorporate it, bringing it down here back into the body. So we kind of spiral down in the rebirth process into the underworld. We then go up into the heavens, and then that's all integrated here in the heart. So it's a kind of spiral that goes like that. And when we look at deep trance experiences, death, rebirth experiences, that kind of is what happens. Often we go into the emotions, the old stuff, the untransmuted stuff. We then work through that. It might be very difficult, and then we go up into the heavens to sort of gain the revelation and to have the regeneration, and then it all comes together at the end in our heart, so that we can become whole, so that from the heart we can regenerate this horizontal realm of the four elements. Our world out there, our world out there is formed of the four elements. And then obviously in that horizontal realm of the four elements, we have nature in its untransmuted form. And then bringing the celestial in is a way to transmute the raw materials here. It's almost like, the underworld is all that is past, and the celestial world is all that is potential, all that can be in the future. So that's kind of a way of, I think, starting to put together a cosmology of ways of understanding how the different facets of spirituality fit together. And within, let's say, the context of Christianity, I think Christianity has a concept of the all God, the Father, and Jesus Christ is the model of what the enlightened human can become. But Orthodox Christianity kind of eliminated the other gods and goddesses, the planets, the other parts of consciousness. But of course, the message of Christ is essentially the message of rebirth through the initiation, through the mysteries. And that is the potential of who we can become. And when we become that, we reconnect to God the Father directly. So those are the mysteries of transformation, transmutation of what we could be. But my belief is that originally Christianity was a mystery religion that was a lot broader. But at some point, the sacraments of the communion were taken out of Christianity, and an orthodoxy was constructed in order to create a book of rules that could be sort of easily followed or easily imposed. So Christianity in many ways is also like a pruned or a redacted version of a bigger cosmic vision. But of course, in alchemy and in the Hermetic arts, the secret expression of Christianity in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance kept a space for that kind of cosmic model I've just discussed, through astrology, through magical practice, through alchemical processes, etc. So that did stay alive, but it was severely suppressed, and it was severely kind of brushed aside, or there was an attempt was made to destroy it. So it's almost like I think in this process of gaining heaven on earth, this model kind of helps us understand how the different bits can fit together.